My daughter-in-law called my late wife's life's work clutter and threw it in the trash. A simple wooden recipe box filled with 40 years of handwritten cards, gone. I pulled it from the bin that night, and tucked inside the flour and sugar section was a sealed envelope I'd never seen. My wife's letter began, "If you're reading this, she's tried to erase me. The house is not what they think." I am that widowed father. For 38 years, my wife Alina filled that box with recipes, but also with notes, dates, and memories from our life. It was our unofficial family archive. What my daughter-in-law saw as a dusty relic held the proof of everything we built. And the document inside that envelope, witnessed and notarized, didn't just change who inherits our home. It exposed a plan to take it that was already in motion. Alina wasn't just my wife. She was the family archivist, the keeper of stories. Every card in that box had a history. Her grandmother's ginger snap recipe, stained with vanilla extract from 1952. The instructions for my mother's meatloaf, written in her shaky hands 6 months before she passed. The date of our first dinner in this house, scribbled on the back of a card for beef bourguignon, October 12, 1985. She didn't just collect recipes. She documented our life. I'm Henry. I retired 3 years ago after 40 years teaching high school history. Alina was a librarian. We met in the stacks of our local branch in 1979, arguing over the last copy of a book on colonial architecture. She won the argument. I won everything else. We bought this 3-bedroom Craftsman in Oak Glen the year our son David turned 7. We painted the walls sunflower yellow because Alina said it felt like morning light all day. We built a life here, quiet and full. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2018. She fought for 16 months. She passed in my arms, in our living room, on a Tuesday morning in September, with the sun coming through that yellow wall. Our son David is 38. He's an IT project manager, serious, kind, but someone who prefers systems to surprises. He married Chloe 4 years ago. The wedding was in a vineyard north of town. I remember Chloe that day, effervescent, the center of every photo. She was a real estate agent, ambitious, with a laugh that filled a room. I thought her confidence was strength. What I missed, what I chose to see as drive, was a current of relentless control. The first sign was subtle. About a year after the wedding, David mentioned offhand that Chloe was helping them streamline their finances. He said it like it was a good thing, a modern approach. Then, 6 months later, he casually noted that Chloe had suggested they add her name to his savings account, for simplicity. It was a joint account his mother and I had started for him when he was born. I said nothing. It wasn't my business. The friction began over this house. Chloe's comments started as gentle nudges. "This place is a lot for you to manage, Henry. Have you thought about how peaceful a nice condo could be?" She'd walk through rooms and point out things that needed updating, the old wiring, the original windows, framing every observation as concern. I deflected with humor. I'd say, "These bones are solid, Chloe. They've held up longer than I have." Then about 8 months ago, the tone shifted. The concern became strategy. She began talking about estate planning and avoiding probate nightmares. She recommended her lawyer, a guy named Stephen Chase, for what she called a property review. I declined politely. I told her Alina and I had our affairs in order, handled by a firm we'd used for decades. My refusal, my first firm no, seemed to change something. The friendly pressure calcified into something colder. David became quieter during these visits. He'd get up to check something on the car when the house talk began. I saw the tension in his shoulders. I asked him once, over a beer in the garage, if everything was okay. He gave me a tight smile and said, "Chloe's just a planner, Dad. She wants what's best." But he wouldn't meet my eyes. The kitchen clean-out was Chloe's idea. She presented it as a gift. "I'm giving you a Sunday, Henry. We're going to tackle that kitchen so you can have a fresh, modern space, no cost to you." David was there, nodding along. I didn't want my kitchen overhauled. I liked its worn counters, the chip in the sink where David dropped a mason jar as a boy. But they insisted. Chloe framed it as a family project. I felt the trap, but saying no felt like rejecting my own son, so I said yes. A tactical arrow. They arrived that Sunday at 9. Chloe had a clipboard. She had boxes labeled donate, trash, and keep. She was a general. She directed David to empty the upper cabinets. She told me to sort through the pantry. She moved through my kitchen like it was a listing she was staging for sale. Sentiment was not a category on her clipboard. The recipe box was on a shelf beside the stove. next to Alina's well-worn copy of The Joy of Cooking *. Chloe pulled it down, blew dust off the lid, and opened it. She flicked through the cards with her thumb. "Henry, this is clutter," she said, her voice flat, professional. "These are just stains and old paper. We can find any of these recipes online in 2 seconds." Before I could speak, before I could even process the sentence, she walked to the trash box and dropped it in. It landed with a soft thud on top of a bundle of old newspapers. I felt a physical pain, a punch to the chest. I stood frozen. David looked from Chloe to me, his mouth a thin line. He said nothing, not a word. Chloe moved on to the utensil drawer. "We'll get you a nice new knife block," she said, as if commenting on the weather. I waited for an hour, moving numbly through the pantomime of sorting cans of soup. When Chloe announced she was running to get more trash bags, I acted. The moment her car left the driveway, I went to the box. I lifted the recipe box from the trash. I wiped a smudge of coffee grounds from the lid. I took it to my study and closed the door. My hands were shaking. I opened the box. The familiar scent of cardstock and spice greeted me. I began checking the sections, a desperate inventory: appetizers, soups, breads. In the baking section, behind a card for oatmeal cookies, I felt it. A sealed, letter-sized envelope. It was crisp, white, unmarked. It had been tucked neatly behind the divider. I had never seen it before. I turned it over. On the back, in Alina's elegant, unmistakable script, was a single line: "For Henry's eyes only, if found, open immediately." Below that, a date: June 3rd, 2018. That was 2 months after her diagnosis. 2 months after we sat at this very desk and signed our updated wills together, leaving the house and our assets to each other, then to David. We had done it all correctly, with our lawyer present. I stared at that envelope. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear the clock on my desk ticking. I knew with a cold certainty that whatever was inside this envelope was the reason Chloe wanted that box gone. This wasn't about clutter. This was about targeted deletion. She knew, or she suspected. She had tried to erase the one piece of Alina she couldn't control. I didn't open it, not then. The weight of it felt too immense. I needed to be steady. I needed to be ready for what it said. I slid the envelope into the center drawer of my desk and locked it. I returned the recipe box to the shelf, empty now of its secret. When Chloe returned, bags in hand, she never glanced at it. The clean-out continued, but the mission had already failed. She just didn't know it yet. That night after they left, I sat in the dark living room. I thought about the date on the envelope, June 3rd. I mentally walked back through that terrible, beautiful spring, the chemo days, the quiet afternoons. Alina had been tireless, organizing photos, writing letters to David for his future milestones, and she had been private, spending hours in her study. I thought it was her way of coping, of putting her world in order. Now I understood. She wasn't just putting things in order. She was building a defense. I unlocked my desk drawer. I held the envelope. This was no ordinary letter. It was a legal document. I could feel the stiff pages inside. A codicil, a new will, a trust. The law is clear. A later valid will revokes an earlier one. A properly executed codicil changes everything. If this was what I thought it was, then the will Chloe and David believed was the final word. The one leaving them this house wasn't the final word at all. And that meant the pressure to get me out, the condos, the estate planning. It wasn't just about convenience. It was a race against a clock they didn't fully know was ticking. They needed to get the house transferred, sold, or me out of it before this document could ever see the light of day. The kitchen clean-out wasn't an act of decluttering. It was a surgical strike. I placed the envelope back in the drawer. I still didn't open it, because once I knew what it said, the war would begin. And I needed to know one more thing first. I needed to know how deep this went. Was my son a prisoner in this plan, or was he a partner? The answer would determine everything. I picked up the phone. I had to make a call I never imagined making. I had to call my lawyer on a Sunday night and utter the sentence that would end the quiet life I had left. "Susan," I said when she answered, "I think my wife left a bomb, and my family is trying to make sure it never goes off." Susan met me at her office at 8 the next morning. I placed the unopened envelope on her desk. "Alina hid this," I said. "2 months after we signed our wills with you, I found it last night. My daughter-in-law tried to throw the box it was in straight into the trash." Susan, ever the professional, put on her reading glasses. She didn't ask questions. She picked up a letter opener. The sound of the paper tearing was loud in the quiet room. She slid out the contents. There were 3 pages. The first was a handwritten letter from Alina to me. The second was a single-page legal document. The third was a smaller printed receipt. Susan read the legal document first, her eyes scanning quickly. Then she went very still. She looked up at me. "Henry," she said quietly, "this is a holographic codicil to your wife's last will and testament. Dated June 3rd, 2018, properly witnessed and notarized. It is absolutely valid." My heart was a drum. What does it change? She took a breath. "It modifies one specific bequest, the house. Your joint wills left everything to the surviving spouse, then to David. This codicil changes the disposition of the house only. Upon your death or upon the sale of the property during your lifetime, the net proceeds from the sale of the home are not to go to David. They are to be placed into a charitable trust, the Elena Marie Grant Memorial Literacy Fund, administered by the local library foundation." The heir left the room. I stared at her. She disinherited him from the house. "Not exactly," Susan said, tapping the page. "Read the rationale in her letter. It's not about punishing David. It's about protecting the asset from external influence. The codicil states that the change is made due to concerns about undue influence and coercion upon the heir by a third party, specifically naming Chloe by name. It states that the testator, Elena, fears the home she built with you will be liquidated not for the heir's benefit, but to service the debts and ambitions of that third party. The trust is her way of ensuring the house's value serves a purpose that reflects her life's values, if it cannot remain in the family under the right circumstances." I reached for Elena's letter. My wife's voice rose from the page. "My dearest Henry, if you are reading this, then my fears were justified. I have watched a pattern emerge. I have seen how Chloe views our life not as something to join, but as an asset to be managed and liquidated. I see the pressure on David. It is not subtle. I believe she will, after I am gone, turn her focus to you and to this house. Our son is a good man, but he is in a fog of love and manipulation. He cannot see the siege engine being built at his own gate. I will not let the home where we loved, where we raised our boy, become a line item in her portfolio to fund a lifestyle for her parents or to erase the memory of us. I have spoken to David gently about standing firm. He hears but does not listen, so I take this step. It is my shield for you and for the memory of us. The house is yours for as long as you live. Sell it if you need to for your care, but if it is sold or when you pass, let its value give others the joy of stories, the way this house did for us. Let it fund literacy. Let it be my final chapter in this town. I have done this with a clear mind and a full heart. Our lawyer Susan was not used for this. I used a notary public downtown with 2 witnesses from the library staff who know me but not our family. No one in our circle knows this exists. I have hidden it where only you would think to look, and where only someone trying to erase me would think to destroy. I love you always. Be strong, Elena. I finished reading, my vision blurred. She had seen it all. From her sickbed, she had diagnosed the future with terrifying accuracy. She hadn't just left a document. She had laid a trap for a predator she knew was coming, and I had almost walked right past it. Susan broke the silence. "Henry, this is a nuclear option in estate terms. It completely alters the inheritance landscape. If David and Chloe were counting on this asset, and from what you've described about the pressure to get you to sell or move, they absolutely were. This document blows that plan apart. Legally, it's ironclad. The notarization and witness signatures are flawless. It was executed before her mental capacity could ever be questioned. This is her true final wish." The implications began to detonate one by one. Chloe's behavior wasn't just aggressive estate planning. It was a preemptive strike. She must have suspected Elena might have taken steps to protect the house. Maybe Elena let something slip in her final days. Maybe it was just Chloe's nature to eliminate any variable she couldn't control. The kitchen cleanout was a search and destroy mission. She was looking for this. "Does David know?" I asked, my voice rough. Susan folded her hands. The codicil was filed confidentially with the county recorder at the time of execution as required. It's part of the will file now, but it's not something that gets mailed out. The executor of the estate, which is you, and the named attorney would discover it upon death during probate. Since you're alive, it's dormant. So no, unless Elena told him, or unless Chloe somehow accessed the confidential court file, which is highly unlikely, they do not know. But someone had known enough to look. The question was who? I left Susan's office with the documents copied and secured in her safe. The original was back in my locked drawer. I felt like I was carrying a live wire. I drove home, but I didn't go inside. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway. The yellow house looked back at me, innocent. It had no idea it was now the center of a silent war. The first skirmish came that evening. It was David, not a text, a phone call. His voice was strained. "Dad, Chloe's really upset. She feels like you've been distant since the cleanout. She thinks you're angry about the recipe box." This was the test. I kept my voice even. "I was surprised she threw it out, David. Those were your mother's things." I know, she gets into a mode. It's about efficiency. She didn't mean any disrespect." The excuse was hollow even to him. He paused. "Listen, the reason I'm calling, she wants to have a family meeting tomorrow night at our place. She's got some ideas she wants to run by you about the house. More of a collaborative discussion this time." A collaborative discussion. The phrase made my skin crawl. What kind of ideas, David? He hesitated, a long, telling silence. "Just options to make sure you're set up for the long term. She's been talking to a financial planner. It's all really positive stuff, Dad." Positive? I looked at my house. Elena's words echoed, a siege engine at his own gate. He was inside the walls, parroting the talking points of the army outside. "I'll be there," I said. The meeting was not positive. It was an ambush. Chloe had PowerPoint slides. On her large living room television, she had a presentation titled "Henry's Golden Years, a Strategic Pathway." Slide 1, a photo of my house with a large red arrow pointing to a stock photo of a gleaming modern condo complex. "Leveraging equity for freedom," the slide header read. She stood with a laser pointer. "Henry, we've done the math. The current market value of your home, minus the small remaining mortgage, gives you over $600,000 in equity. A condo in the new Riverwalk development would cost half that. You'd walk away with $300,000 in cash, plus no more property taxes, no maintenance, a gym, a pool. It's freedom." David sat on the couch, staring at his knees. He was a ghost at his own table. "Who is we, Chloe?" I asked, my voice calm. "Sorry. We've done the math. Who is we?" She flashed a tight smile. "Well, me, and I had Stephen, my lawyer, run some numbers, and a realtor friend." "Your lawyer," I repeated. "And have you, or your lawyer, or your realtor friend put an offer on my house yet, or selected the condo you'd like me to buy?" The smile vanished. "Of course not. This is just about exploring options for your benefit." "Here's my option," I said, standing up. I didn't raise my voice. "The house is not for sale. It is not an asset to be leveraged. It is my home. This conversation is over." Chloe's composure cracked. The professional veneer shattered, revealing the raw ambition beneath. "It's irresponsible, Henry. It's a 4-bedroom house for one man. David is your only heir. This is about his future too. Keeping that money locked in a dying asset it's emotional, it's not rational." I turned to my son. "David, is this what you want? Do you want me to sell my home?" He looked up, his face pale. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked from me to Chloe's furious expression and then back to the floor. His silence was the loudest sound in the room. "That's what I thought," I said. I walked to the door. I turned back. "And Chloe, you can tell Stephen Chase his services won't be needed, and stay out of my kitchen." The siege had begun in earnest. The next phase was legal harassment, but cleverly disguised. 3 days later, I received a letter from Adult Protective Services. It stated that a concerned party had filed a report expressing worries about my living conditions, cognitive decision-making capacity, and potential vulnerability to financial exploitation. It requested a home visit to conduct an assessment. I read the letter and felt a cold fury. This was Chloe's move. She was trying to have me declared incompetent. If APS could establish I was a vulnerable adult, they could petition for a conservatorship. And who would they suggest as conservator? My only son, David, who was married to Chloe. It was a chess move, and a vicious one. I called Susan immediately. She was grim. This is a common tactic in inheritance coercion. It's meant to intimidate and drain your resources. We will respond aggressively. We will demand the name of the complainant, though they often hide behind anonymity. We will have your doctor provide a full cognitive assessment. We will turn their weapon against them. We did. My doctor, a man who'd known me for 20 years, wrote a scathing letter attesting to my mental acuity. Susan filed a formal complaint against the anonymous reporter for malicious filing. The APS visit happened. A weary-looking social worker came, toured my immaculate, organized home, saw my files, my medications sorted in a weekly planner, my calendar filled with volunteer work. She closed her notebook after 15 minutes. "Mr. Grant, you are clearly not the person described in this report. I am sorry for the intrusion." But the message was sent. Chloe was not backing down, she was escalating. Then came the quiet attack, the one I almost missed. A week after the APS visit, I got a call from my mortgage company. A very polite woman asked if I was aware that a request had been made to add a new name to the title of my property. The request had been submitted online with what appeared to be my digital signature. My blood ran cold. "What name?" I asked. "Chloe Ann Grant," the woman said. I drove to the county recorder's office. I pulled the property records. There, filed just 2 days prior, was a document titled Quitclaim Deed. It purported to transfer a 1/2 interest in my home from me to Chloe Grant. The signature page was a forgery, a bad one. My supposedly notarized signature was a sloppy scrawl, but it had been filed. It was now a cloud on my title. This was fraud, plain and simple. This was no longer pressure. This was a crime. I brought the document to Susan. Her face was stone. "This is the pivot, Henry. This moves us from family dispute to criminal fraud. We go to the police today." We filed a report with the Economic Crimes Unit. A detective took copies of the forged deed, my real signature from my driver's license and will, and a statement. He interviewed the notary whose stamp was falsified. It was a fast-moving case. The digital trail led back to an IP address registered to David and Chloe's home. The detective asked me the hard question: "Do you want to press charges against your daughter-in-law and potentially your son if he was involved?" I thought of David, silent on the couch. I thought of the boy who loved that house. I made a decision. Press charges against Chloe Grant for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. My son, I don't believe he had the spine to do this, but I want him questioned. I want him to see the handcuffs. I want him to have to choose. The police arrived at their home on a Thursday afternoon. I wasn't there. Susan relayed the details. Chloe was arrested at the door. She was Mirandized in front of the neighbors. She screamed for David. David stood on the porch, shell-shocked, as they put her in the back of the cruiser. The detective showed him the evidence, the IP address, the forged deed. He asked David if he knew about it. According to the detective, David crumpled. He didn't cry, he just seemed to shrink. He said, "She told me she was just protecting our interests. She said it was a standard paperwork thing. She said Henry would never know." He had known, not the details perhaps, but the intent. He had chosen to believe the lie. The siege engine had rolled right over him. Chloe was released on bail that night. The charges were serious: felony fraud. She was ordered to have no contact with me. David called me the next day. He was sobbing, true, broken sobs I hadn't heard since he was a child. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was a forgery, but I knew she was pushing. I let her. I was weak." It was the confession I needed, and it broke my heart. "Come home, David," I said. "Come to the house. We need to talk." He came over that evening alone. He looked shattered. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd done his homework. I didn't show him Alina's codicil, not yet. First, I needed the full truth. "Start from the beginning, David. When did this start?" He took a shaky breath. "It started after Mom died. Chloe, she saw the house as an anchor, a dead asset. She started talking about your legacy and how it should be liquid to be useful. Then, about a year ago, she got more intense. She said she'd heard from someone, a rumor." "From who?" I pressed. He wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't say, but she said she heard a rumor that Mom might have done something, tricky with her will, something that could lock up the house. She said we needed to secure the asset before anything came to light. That's when she started the campaign to get you to sell. The clean-out, she was looking for something. She said if Mom had left any late change documents, they'd be with her personal papers, in her handwriting. So it was a rumor, a leak, someone at the library, one of the witnesses, the notary. Elena's secrecy had been almost perfect. Almost. Did you know she was going to forge a deed, David? No, God, no, Dad. I thought she was just pressuring you. Doing the APS thing was already too far, but she said it was just to get you to see reason. The deed, I had no idea. He put his head in his hands. She's been under so much pressure herself, her parents, they're in debt, deep. They've been leaning on her for money. She saw the house as the solution. For all of us, she said. There it was, the final piece. It was never just about ambition. It was about using my home, Elena's home, as a life raft for her own sinking family. Elena had predicted it with chilling precision. I looked at my broken son. The war was no longer outside. It was here at this table. I had the weapon to end it, the codicil, but using it now would be the final blow. It would tell him his mother, in her final act, had cut him off to protect their home from the woman he loved. It would tell him his compliance had cost him his inheritance. I had a choice: reveal the truth and risk destroying my son, or hold it back and live with a secret that could still explode. As I sat there, the phone rang. It was Susan. Her voice was urgent, strained. Henry, we have a problem. A big one. Chloe's lawyer, Stephen Chase, just filed an emergency motion in probate court. He's petitioning to have David declared your temporary conservator, citing the APS report and claiming you are being financially reckless by not selling a deteriorating asset. But that's not the main event. In the filing, he alleges that you are in possession of a forged, backdated will amendment that you are using to threaten and defraud your son. He's demanding you produce any and all documents in your possession regarding Elena's estate for immediate inspection by the court. My grip tightened on the phone. Chloe was fighting back, and she was using the one thing she suspected but couldn't find as her own weapon. She was accusing me of the very crime she was committing. She was going to force the codicil into the open in a hostile court and try to have it declared a fake. Susan, I said, my eyes locked on David's confused face. What do we do? We fight, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. We take her document and we shove it down their throats. We file the codicil with the court tomorrow morning, and then we countersue for intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, and tortious interference with inheritance. We end this. But Henry, once we file, there's no going back. David will know everything. The world will know everything. Are you ready? I looked at my son, the boy who used to climb the oak tree in the backyard, the man who had just confessed his weakness. The inheritance was no longer about a house. It was about what was left of a family. I took a deep breath. The bridge was burning behind me. File it, I said. Filing the codicil was like throwing a switch that electrified the entire case. Overnight, the probate court's emergency motion from Chloe became a secondary concern. The central document was now Elena's handwritten codicil, a piece of paper that carried the weight of a wrecking ball. Susan filed it first thing in the morning, along with a motion to dismiss Chloe's petition as frivolous and a counterclaim listing every offense from harassment to forgery. I called David and told him to meet me at Susan's office. I didn't give him details over the phone. He arrived looking hollowed out, the guilt and fear etched into his face. Susan laid the copy of the codicil on the table in front of him. Your mother wrote this, David, 2 months after her diagnosis. It is legally binding. He read it. His eyes moved over his mother's handwriting, the formal legal language, the notary seal. He read the clause about the charitable trust. He read the rationale, the line about undue influence and coercion by a third party, specifically Chloe. His hands began to shake. He finished and looked up at me, his expression one of utter devastation. She thought I would let this happen, that I would let Chloe take your house. She thought you were in a fog, son, I said, my voice softer than I felt. She saw the pattern before any of us did. This wasn't against you. It was a wall to protect what we built from being dismantled. But the house goes to a charity. The financial blow, the erased expectation, finally registered. Upon my death, or if I sell it, I said, It's mine for as long as I live, but yes, its value when I'm gone will fund literacy programs at the library. That was her wish, her final documented wish. David put his head in his hands. All this time, Chloe was rushing because she was afraid of something like this. A rumor. She heard a rumor from someone at the title company that a confidential codicil had been filed years ago. She didn't know what it said, but she knew it was a threat. The whole campaign, it was a race to get the house sold and the money in our hands before this could ever come to light. He let out a bitter, choked sound, and I helped her. I facilitated the race against my own mother's last will. There was no comfort I could offer. The truth was a cold room we had to sit in together. The legal gears began to grind with terrifying speed. Chloe's lawyer, Stephen Chase, responded to our filing with a blistering motion of his own. He didn't just challenge the codicil, he attacked its validity and Alina's state of mind. He claimed the codicil was the product of terminal illness-induced paranoia and undue influence by Henry Grant, who isolated his wife and poisoned her mind against her daughter-in-law. He requested a psychiatric post-mortem analysis, a horrifying legal maneuver that would involve dragging Alina's medical records and mental state through the mud. Susan was ready. She filed the affidavits from the 2 library witnesses and the notary public, all attesting to Alina's clear-mindedness and deliberate action. She filed a motion for sanctions against Chase for making frivolous and defamatory claims. The probate court judge, a no-nonsense man named Judge Rivera, consolidated the emergency conservatorship hearing with a preliminary hearing on the codicil's validity. The hearing was set for 1 week later. It would be a bench hearing, no jury, but it would set the tone for everything to come. In the meantime, the criminal case against Chloe for the forged deed was moving forward. The district attorney, smelling blood in the water from the inheritance dispute, decided to pursue it aggressively. The week before the hearing was a siege of a different kind. Reporters from the local paper, tipped off by someone, likely Chase, started calling. "Inheritance war erupts over family home," the headline would soon read. "My quiet street saw unfamiliar cars. David called me panicked." Chloe, facing felony charges and the collapse of her inheritance plan, had turned venomous. She told David I had fabricated the codicil after the fact. She said I was a bitter old man trying to punish them for starting a family. She said if he sided with me, she would leave him and take everything. He was trapped in a crossfire of his own making. The day of the hearing arrived. The Oak Glen County Courthouse was all cold marble and echoing halls. Susan and I walked in together. David came alone, sitting on the opposite side of the gallery, a solitary figure. Chloe entered with Stephen Chase. She wore a severe black suit, her face a mask of controlled fury. She did not look at David. Judge Rivera called the room to order. He was a small man with a sharp gaze that missed nothing. He summarized the motions before him, the petition for temporary conservatorship over me and the question of the codicil's preliminary validity. Chase went first. He was all slick aggression. He painted a picture of a vulnerable, grieving widower being manipulated by a greedy lawyer. He portrayed Alina as a frail, sick woman, susceptible to the fears her husband planted about her new daughter-in-law. "This so-called codicil," he said, holding up a copy, "is not an act of love. It is an act of spite, engineered by Henry Grant to cut out his son and retain control from the grave." Then it was Susan's turn. She stood calmly. "Your Honor, opposing counsel's narrative is a fiction, a desperate attempt to obscure criminal conduct. The document is genuine, but let's talk about the context of its discovery." She turned and looked directly at Chloe. The testator hid this document in her personal recipe box, among her most cherished possessions. Why? Because she feared the very person who, years later, would call those possessions clutter and attempt to throw them in the trash during an unsolicited kitchen cleanout. That cleanout, Your Honor, was not an act of organization. It was a search and destroy mission. The respondent, Chloe Grant, was looking for this document. When she didn't find it, she resorted to fraud. Susan then entered the police report and the forged quitclaim deed into evidence. Judge Rivera examined the deed, comparing the sloppy signature to my exemplars. His eyebrow rose. Chase tried to object, claiming it was prejudicial. The judge overruled him. "It goes to motive and pattern of conduct, counsel." Then Susan played her ace. Your Honor, we can also demonstrate the respondent's knowledge and fear of this document prior to its discovery. We have a witness. A side door opened. A woman in her 60s, wearing a library name badge, walked in and was sworn in. It was Maureen, one of the library clerks who had witnessed Elena's signature. Susan approached her. Ms. Finley, do you recognize the respondent, Chloe Grant? Yes, Maureen said, her voice clear. She came to the library about 3 months ago. She asked me very casually if I ever notarized documents for Elena Grant. I said sometimes. She asked if I remembered notarizing anything for her near the end of her life, maybe a will or something. I told her I couldn't discuss client matters. She became insistent. She said she was just trying to tie up loose ends for the family. She offered me $200 in cash if I could check my records for any documents with Elena's name from June of 2018. The gallery was dead silent. Chloe stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. What did you do? Susan asked. I refused, of course. I reported the approach to my supervisor. It felt sinister. Chase leapt up. Hearsay, this is classic hearsay. It's an admission of a party opponent, Your Honor, Susan countered smoothly. It shows the respondent's state of mind and her active search for the document she now claims never existed or is a forgery. Judge Rivera nodded slowly. The narrative had irrevocably shifted. Chloe wasn't a victim of a paranoid scheme. She was an active hunter trying to eliminate a legal obstacle. Chase's case unraveled from there. The petition for conservatorship was dismissed with prejudice, Judge Rivera calling it a transparent and malicious misuse of protective services. On the codicil, he ruled from the bench. Based on the uncontroverted witness affidavits, the notarization, and the documented chain of discovery, this court finds the holographic codicil dated June 3, 2018, to be prima facie valid. The burden of proof to overturn it at full trial rests entirely with the petitioners, and given the evidence of misconduct presented today, that burden appears substantial. It was a crushing legal victory. The codicil would stand. The house was protected. Outside the courtroom, Chloe stormed off with her lawyer, not a glance at David. David stood by the water fountain, looking lost. I walked over to him. It's over, David, I said. The house stays. It goes to the trust when I'm gone. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I know. I'm glad Mom's wishes are clear. I have to go home. I have to figure out what's left of my marriage. I wanted to hug him, but the space between us felt like a canyon. He walked away. I thought that was the end of the escalation. I was wrong. 2 days later, the detective on the fraud case called me. Mr. Grant, we've been digging into Chloe Grant's finances as part of our investigation. We found something significant. It's about her parents. He told me that Chloe's parents, Warren and Linda, weren't just in debt. They were facing foreclosure on their own home, and the loan they had taken out 6 months prior, the one they defaulted on, was a second mortgage. The collateral they had offered to secure that loan was not their own house. It was mine. Somehow, using preliminary title work maybe from her real estate contacts, Chloe had provided paperwork to a shady online lender suggesting she had a forthcoming interest in my property. She had used the asterisk promise of my house as collateral for a $100,000 loan to her parents. The loan was now in default. The lender was suing not just Chloe and her parents, but had also filed a lien against my property, claiming an equitable interest. This was the wait, it gets worse moment. The fraud wasn't just a forged deed. It was a financial Russian doll, one crime hidden inside another. She hadn't just tried to steal the house, she had already begun to monetize its phantom equity. Susan was apoplectic. This is lien fraud. This is next level. We have to get this lien removed immediately, or it clouds your title and you can't sell or refinance even if you wanted to. It required another lawsuit, this time against the online lender, to prove the fraud and clear the title. The legal maze was deepening and the costs were mounting, but the shock of it had a perverse silver lining. It was the final piece of evidence that broke David. He showed up at my door that night, a suitcase in his hand. His eyes were red, but clear for the first time in years. She told me about the loan, he said, his voice flat. She's proud of it. She said she was being proactive and leveraging an underutilized asset to help her family. She said I was naive for not seeing the opportunity. Dad, she's not sorry. She thinks she's a genius who got caught. He set the suitcase down. I can't go back. I've filed for divorce. My heart ached for him, but also lifted. The fog had finally burned away. The divorce, combined with the crushing weight of the criminal fraud case and the lost probate battle, broke Chloe's resistance. Her lawyer approached Susan with a settlement offer. Chloe would drop all claims against the estate and the codicil. She would plead guilty to a lesser charge on the forgery, accepting probation. In return, we would drop our civil counterclaims and, crucially, not oppose the dismissal of the Leon fraud case if she worked with the lender to dissolve it herself. It was a retreat, a total surrender. We took the deal. The goal was never to see her in prison, it was to make her go away, permanently. The final court date for the criminal plea was a quiet, procedural affair. Chloe stood before the judge, uttered a muted guilty, and was sentenced to 3 years of probation and 200 hours of community service. She was ordered to have no contact with me indefinitely. She left the courtroom without looking at anyone. It was over, the legal war was won. The house was secure, its future dictated by Alina's hand. David was living in a temporary apartment, starting therapy and working through the wreckage of his marriage. I had my home, my peace, and a son who was, tentatively, coming back to me. But as I sat on my porch that evening, the victory felt hollow, lined with ash. I had protected the structure, the foundation Alina and I built, but the family that was supposed to live within it was fractured. David was free, but he was also broken. I had the house, but I had to use my wife's secret weapon against my own child to keep it. The cost was etched in every quiet room. The foundation had held, but the landscape around it was forever changed. And as I watched the sun set behind the oak tree we planted, I understood that the next battle wasn't for property or legal rights. It was for something far more fragile, the chance to rebuild a son and to find out what a legacy really means when the fighting finally stops. Rebuilding a person is slower work than rebuilding a house. There are no blueprints for grief, guilt, and betrayal. David moved into my guest room for a while, not because he had nowhere else to go, but because we both needed to remember what it felt like to be under the same roof without an agenda hanging between us. The first week was quiet, heavy with things unsaid. We ate meals. We watched baseball. We didn't talk about Chloe or the codicil or the court cases. We just existed in the same space, relearning how to breathe. Then one evening over spaghetti, he put his fork down. I keep thinking about the last time I saw Mom, he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were raw. It was 2 days before she died. She was so thin. She held my hand and she said, "David, promise me you'll look after your dad, and promise me you'll always know the difference between a gift and a debt." I thought I understood. I didn't understand at all. That was the crack in the dam. We started talking, not as plaintiff and defendant, but as father and son who had both lost the same woman and then almost lost each other. He told me about the slow, insidious pressure Chloe had applied, how she framed every demand as financial wisdom, every manipulation as love, how she'd isolated him from his friends by mocking them as bad influences on their financial future. He described the constant anxiety, the feeling that he was always failing some invisible test. He was describing emotional abuse, and he was only now beginning to name it. I told him about the loneliness after his mother died, the fear that I was losing him too, the sickening realization that the woman he married saw our family history as a balance sheet. We apologized to each other for my blindness, for his silence. It was the first step. David started therapy. I went to a few sessions with him. It was excruciating and necessary. The therapist helped him see that his desire to keep peace, to be the good husband, had made him a collaborator in his own undermining. He had to grieve not just the end of his marriage, but the version of himself that allowed it to happen. As he healed, we started working with our hands. We didn't talk about big things. We fixed the loose step on the back porch. We repainted the garage door, the same sunflower yellow Alina had chosen. We pruned the oak tree, physical work, with clear problems and clear solutions. It was a language we both still understood. The legal and financial pieces settled into their final places. Chloe's divorce lawyer negotiated a settlement. Since they had no children and she had brought significant debt into the marriage, David emerged with his retirement accounts intact and a clean break. He bought a small townhouse a few miles away. It was his own. He chose the paint colors himself. A light gray, he said, felt like a fresh start. Charitable trust, the Elena Marie Grant Memorial Literacy Fund, was formally established at the library. I worked with the foundation director to set the terms. The proceeds from the eventual sale of the house would create an endowment, funding after-school reading programs, adult literacy classes, and book purchases for the children's section. At the signing ceremony, the director showed me the plaque they intended to mount, in memory of Elena Grant, who knew stories build homes too. I had to step outside for a moment. But here is where I made a decision. The codicil said the trust was funded upon my death or the sale of the house. I was 70 years old. The house was paid off. I had my pension, my savings. I realized I didn't want to wait. I wanted to see her legacy in action. So I sold a parcel of land I owned upstate, an investment property Elena and I had bought years ago. I used the proceeds to create an initial endowment for the trust, $100,000, to get the program started now. The house would remain mine, and upon my death, the full value from its sale would pour into the fund, expanding it exponentially. It was a way to honor her wishes without turning my home into a mausoleum. It felt right. David supported the decision completely. "It's what Mom wanted," he said, "and this way you get to see it happen." The programs launched that fall. I volunteered at the library one afternoon a week, helping in the children's section. Seeing a kid's eyes light up when they sounded out a new word, watching a teenager discover a book that spoke to them, it was like seeing Elena's spirit move through the room. It was no longer just a legal directive, it was a living thing. Then came the final surprise. It was a year to the day after the kitchen cleanout. I was in my study, going through a box of old photographs David had asked me to digitize. I pulled out a large envelope of pictures from a long-ago vacation. As I shuffled them, a smaller, faded envelope, addressed to me in Elena's handwriting, fluttered to the floor. It must have been tucked among the photos for decades. The postmark was smudged, but the date inside the letter was clear, July 12, 1991. David was 8 years old. The letter was not about wills or inheritance. It was about joy. "My dearest Henry, today at the library, a little girl asked me where the books about dragons lived. I showed her, and her smile was so big it made my heart ache. I came home and watched David building a fort in the backyard, and I thought, this is the only treasure. This right here. The house, the tree, the boy, the books. We are so rich. I am writing this down so that if we ever forget, if we ever get lost in the world of shoulds and musts, we can read this and remember. Our wealth is not in the walls, it's in the life inside them. Never let anyone convince you to trade this for something smaller. All my love, always, Elena." I sat there for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. She had been writing me love letters about our life for 30 years, hiding them like Easter eggs in the clutter of our days. This was the core of her, not the strategic defender of the codicil, but the woman who saw the profound value in a child's smile and a backyard fort. The codicil was her sword. This letter was her heart, and she had left me both. I showed it to David that night. He read it, then read it again. He didn't say anything for a full minute. Then he looked at me, his eyes shining. "She was trying to tell us," he said. "Even back then, she was trying to tell us what to protect." It was the final piece of healing. It reframed everything. The battle over the house hadn't been about denying him an inheritance. It had been about protecting the treasure she wrote about, the intangible wealth of memory, peace, and autonomy, from being liquidated for someone else's concept of wealth. David finally saw it not as a rejection, but as the ultimate act of a mother's love. She was protecting the idea of home for both of us. Last spring, David started dating again. A woman named Anna, a teacher at the elementary school. She has a quiet laugh and kind eyes. The first time she came to dinner, she admired the recipe box, now restored to its place of honor on the kitchen shelf. She asked about the story behind the stained ginger snap card. I told her. She listened, and then she said, "What a beautiful way to remember someone." David caught my eye across the table and gave a small, sure nod. The oak tree is over 15 feet tall now. On Sunday mornings, I still sit in Elena's rocking chair with my coffee, But sometimes, David and Anna join me. We sit in comfortable silence, watching the light filter through the leaves. People ask if I'm angry at how it all played out, at the years of tension and the legal strife. I tell them the truth. The anger has burned away. What's left is a crystalline understanding. Elena's codicil was a boundary written in law. My enforcement of it was a boundary written in action. And boundaries, I have learned, are not walls to keep people out. They are the fences that make the home. They define what is yours to cherish and what is yours to give away freely. Chloe moved to another state. I hear she's in real estate again. I hope she finds peace, but her path is no longer intertwined with ours. The recipe box sits on its shelf, a quiet sentinel. It holds no more secrets, only the sweet, ordinary proof of a life well lived. And the house, this yellow craftsman with the solid bones, stands exactly as it was meant to, as a home, not just an asset. As a place where a new chapter, respectful of the old one, is being written every day. The foundation held, and on that foundation, we are building again. So what do you take from a story like this? That families can break over property, that love and money make dangerous roommates. Those are truths, but they're not the whole truth. The deeper lesson is about visibility. Elena saw a threat coming that I was too grief-stricken to recognize. She saw it not with suspicion, but with clarity. And because she saw it, she acted. She used the law quietly and correctly to build a wall I didn't yet know I would need to stand behind. Her foresight was the ultimate act of protection. It wasn't just a legal document. It was a message in a bottle sent from her final days to my future crisis, saying, I am still here. And I built this for you. We think of inheritance as something passive, something that happens to us, but it can also be an active, deliberate shield. A will, a trust, a codicil, these are not just instructions for distributing things. They are the last statement of your values. They are your final say in what matters and what must be protected. Elena's codicil wasn't about punishing a son. It was about preserving a home's meaning from being converted into mere currency. The law calls it a testament for a reason. It is where you bear witness to what you built and declare what must not be undone. And then there is the cost. The battle cost me time, money, and peace. It cost my son a marriage and a year of his life to regret. It cost us both a simplicity in our relationship that we can never get back. Was it worth it? To preserve a house? On the worst days, I wondered. But then I reread Elena's letter from 1991, the one about dragons and forts, and I understand it was never about the house. It was about the right to define your own treasure. To say, this is sacred. This is not for sale. The recipe box still sits on the shelf. The cards are safe, but its real value was never the recipes. It was the hiding place. It was the proof that in the middle of an ordinary life, between the instructions for oatmeal cookies and the notes about oven temperatures, a person can conceal a piece of their soul, a final, powerful word meant to echo long after they're gone. If you take anything from this, let it be this. Look at what you hold dear, not just the objects, but the meaning inside them. And then look at the people around you, who sees that meaning and who sees only the price tag. Your legacy will be fought in that gap. You can be passive and hope for the best, or you can be like Elena, clear-eyed and brave, and build your quiet defenses while there's still time. The foundation holds, but only if you pour it with intention. Thank you for listening to our story. If these tales of resilience, family, and the quiet battles for what's right means something to you, consider subscribing. More stories like this are waiting.